Hello and welcome to another episode of Mole Thoughts. My name is ChaosMole and today we talk about Alan Wake. As per usual, this is completely spoiler free, so you will know nothing about what is going on with the story. I will talk, of course, about gameplay elements and a few other things, but there will be no spoilers, so you don't have to fear about that. How is Alan Wake 2? Alan Wake 2 is a game I had on my list for a while. I love the previous Remedy games, but all in all, it was more like yeah, we'll see how it goes. And after now, I have been finishing it a few days ago. I can say it is an amazing game with weaknesses. There are some weaknesses, but I would say it is a game of the year contender. So the first question I see a lot from people is, do I have to play Alan Wake 1 and do I have to play Control? Do you have to? No. No, the game is actually doing a pretty good job in leading you on and creating a lot of questions. And I sometimes even said it would be probably more interesting if you haven't played the previous games because you have a lot of questions. The game is then slowly answering in game, and it's more like an additional reveal coming to you. But with that said, just because I'm saying you don't have to, I do not recommend it. At least play Alan Wake 1 or watch a playthrough, and I would still recommend to get a quick recap on what happened in Control because it is important. Like, the thing is, interestingly enough, they are not really taking too much of Control's story. They are taking more what they did with the world building in Control, right? Where they're continuing the story of Alan Wake 1, duh. They are not taking the story of Control, right? They are just taking parts of that world and explanations of that world and put it into Alan Wake 2 because they're now linked together. So I still highly recommend to be knowledgeable of those two games, but do you need it? Nah, not really. But again, I do recommend it. Speaking of which, let's talk about the gameplay. How has that changed from Alan Wake 1? They have definitely improved massively on the gameplay. The gameplay was so shit in Alan Wake 1. I played the remaster for the first time. Like, this was my first time playing Alan Wake this year before Alan Wake 2 came out. And oh my god. Oh, whoa, nah, it's horrible. So the question is, what did they do in Alan Wake 2? And the answer is they pushed it more into the direction of a Resident Evil. And I say into the direction, I'm not saying this is now a Resident Evil game, I'm saying it is getting closer to that. You have your inventory management, you have to manage your resources, they have this weird camera angle going on, and everything feels a bit clumsy when it comes to fighting an enemy. So very much like the old school Resident Evil games. The thing is, though, this game is contradicting itself when it comes to some of their gameplay mechanics. Like in the first one, you always could get back a little bit of battery power for your flashlight. And in the second one, they completely removed that. And unfortunately, that means that there are combat moments or even moments where you have to remove the darkness and you are out of battery. It can happen. And that's not a great feeling, right? It basically leads to, well, I have to waste more ammo, which is also not good, and you probably have to reload and you have to look to get some batteries, because the problem is in Resident Evil games, you know where you get your items because they spawn at specific points in the game. In Alan Wake, it is random. You have no control on what item will be in the chest besides of the weapons. The weapons are fixed, ammunition, bandages, batteries are not. And the game is also taking into account how much you have with you in your inventory. So let's say you already have 20 shots in your pistol, then chances are very low that you are getting pistol ammunition slash you will get pistol ammunition, but there are only 2 shots you are picking up. So it's basically a waste of an inventory slot, or not an inventory slot, like a chest slot, right? Because yes, it gave you something. It was pistol ammo, but it was only 2 shots, and you didn't get anything else. And so that's random. And unfortunately, it sometimes leads to some frustration moments where you kind of need something specific, and the game is like, well, better luck next chest. The same goes with the game is slowly unlocking parts of the map when you are continuing the main story. So you can go back and revisit it. But it sometimes sends you over there when you already had like a big boss fight or you had to use quite a bit of ammunition. And so when you were getting over into that new area, you were hurting for ammo you might get in that area or not. And then when you were leaving that area, you sometimes have less items than you had before. It wasn't really worth it. It really depends. Like, and then there are areas in the game where the game is just drowning you in items, so much so that you have to run back to your shoebox, aka your item storage, and try to store as many items as possible, right? And even then, it's not enough. It's kind of crazy how unbalanced it is, right? It's really unfortunate. But the gameplay is alright. Funny enough, I would go so far to say that the gameplay of Alan Wake 2 is the weakest point. It's more a vehicle for everything else. And some people will like that, some people don't. I was okay with it. I thought the gameplay never overstayed its welcome, and I very much saw it as playing through a Metal Gear Solid game, right? You are in for the story. You want to have those 20-minute cutscenes. You want to have like tons of lore being thrown at you. If you are literally just there to do a survival horror game thingy and you don't really care for anything happening surrounding you, this game is not for you. Like, don't touch it. You will not find any joy in that. And again, this game is focusing on the world, on the characters, on the music, especially the world design and the graphics are just outstanding. People were a little bit also concerned for the minimum specs. No, don't be. Don't be worried about that. What Remedy did here was kind of smart, but also kind of stupid with the specs you need. They put them up there on purpose. They wanted to make sure that the people who are playing this game and who absolutely want to make sure that there's not a single stutter in the game have to go with those specs. I can tell you, my CPU is barely at the minimum, barely. They are requiring what was it, a Ryzen 3600X. I have a 2700X, and because of that, I'm barely at the minimum specs. I had some stutters, I had some slowdowns, so it wasn't smooth sailing. But I have seen enough people who didn't have that problem. Right, they had smooth sailing, especially when the first hot fixes came in a few days later, and so yeah, you if you are close to those specs they're asking, I played the game on high settings, 4040p, and quality DLSS. And again, most of the time I had my 60 FPS with some slowdowns here and there, but that was it. So again, don't worry about the system requirements too much. But let's talk about something else. Let's talk about the story. Wait, Mo, you said no spoilers. Yeah, don't you worry. We are not talking about spoilers here. And I will also not lead you on to make a conclusion on this story. What I want to say is the story is bonkers, right? It's a trip. They are doing some crazy stuff in that story, and it has some great moments. It does lose itself sometimes, though. There are those moments where they kind of try to cramp as much story into Alan Wake 2 as possible because they didn't know when they're making the next Alan Wake, right? Because if you remember, Alan Wake 1 came out 13 years ago, and now the second one is finally out. So they tried to put as much story as possible in there, as much explanation on things as possible, and then the game slowly unraveled at some points where you were like, wait, why are we doing this? What is this? They also tried to cramp in a lot of characters from other Remedy games, and sometimes it didn't make sense. It didn't make absolutely zero sense, but they tried to kind of make a connection here and there, and you were just like, wait, what was that? Go back. Why did we just had those characters in here, this interaction, and you give us no explanation, and this makes absolutely no sense in those circumstances. A bit like Marvel sometimes, right? Where Marvel is trying to link as many story strains to their other Marvel IP. And the same happens here in Alan Wake 2. But again, I really enjoyed the story. I think it was really, really good. And yeah, I I enjoyed Alan Wake 2, and I think that Alan Wake 2 is a Game of the Year contender if Baldur's Gate 3 wouldn't have happened this year. Like, the graphics, the gameplay was decent, but the story, the world design, it's basically you got a game which you normally suspect from PlayStation, right? Who loves to do big story focused games, and a lot of people buy those games, buy the consoles for those story driven games. And that's what Alan Wake 2 is. Alan Wake is not doing something too new when it comes to gameplay, but it tries their damnedest to set up the world, to set up the characters, and they're doing a lot of cool and interesting stuff. So, highly recommend Alan Wake 2. Um, there is a bit of horror in it. There are some jump scares. It's more like a spooky game, right? Instead of like necessarily just horror. It doesn't try to make pee your pants. It's more like on the level of horror of being aware of your surroundings, like being a little bit anxious, but you're not panicking, you're not screaming, you're not like jumping off and leaving the room or something like that. At least not for me. I never had that. So yeah, I highly recommend Alan Wake 2. It was really fun playing through it. And again, thank you so much for watching this. If you want to see my full playthrough, I'm slowly uploading it on YouTube. And of course, you can find it in the playlist where all my live streams are at. With that said, thanks so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.